song you want to find on this planet, right? Because there you have different inputs that give a different flair to the songs that you know already, and that's just what she did in there. Our very own Kaisa Ndumbe Mulongo. She's from Douala, by the way. Now let's shift gears and move on to something else, because last week Pope Francis. Sorry, my tongue just slid there. Pope Francis actually spent 7 days touring Africa. He was in Mozambique, in Madagascar, and in Mauritius. And that was the Pontiff's second trip to Africa since 2015, remember? He came close by. He was in Central Africa in 2015. But then the question we're asking now that he has come and gone is, what are those visits from the various popes living in Africa in terms of impacts and legacies? And I'm looking back to 1969 when we had the first papal visit to Africa, and that was Pope John Paul VI. Am I correct?
Paul VI.
The Sixth. Martin, welcome.
Thank you, Divine.
A couple of people have been asking where you went out to. They said you were missing in action, and I couldn't say you were not feeling well.
Yes, I actually wasn't feeling well for the past 2-3 weeks.
It's all okay now?
Oh, it's okay now, thank God. You know, sometimes I have a feeling that God says, slow down. And when you don't slow down, well, he slows you down. That's probably what happened to me.
Okay.
You know, I've been
thanks for making it, though.
Yes, it's a pleasure to be back again with you to talk about the visits of the Pope, the popes.
I don't want to get my tongue sliding anymore, so I'll not risk, trying to place a figure on the number of papal trips to Africa. But then, what have they left behind after all? Nothing?
Well, first of all, the first Pope to visit Africa was, as you said, Paul VI in 1969. He went to Uganda, and there he, one of the significant things he did in Uganda in 1969 was he canonized the martyrs of Uganda. You know, he raised them in the Catholic parlance. He's raising them up to the honors of the altar. And they became saints, and that had a significant impact throughout the church in Africa, because, of course, many references to the martyrs of Uganda. They serve as a beacon for many of us in the church. And also, during his first visit, there was the first visit by any reigning pope to Africa. And it was inaugurated in Kampala at the time, what has come to be known as SECAM, Symposium of Episcopal Conferences of Africa and Madagascar, that groups all the Episcopal Conferences of Africa.
All right, including that from Cameroon?
Oh, for certain. Yes, including Cameroon, of course, all the countries in Africa. And they just celebrated the 50th anniversary, by the way, during the Pope's visit to Africa this year. And so everything that is dealing with the church in Africa, all the kind of developments that they have come along, schools and hospitals and universities and so on, the Catholic Church in Africa, have actually arisen from these visits, and from the recommendations of the Pope. The popes don't come with a magic wand, you see, wave around and everything goes. No, they come. They are pastors of the church. They are moral authority, and their authority is quite significant among Catholics as well as among other people of other faiths.
Yeah, for us who are non-Catholics, sometimes we look at the Pope like one of those celebrities who just come and then after they leave, nothing stays back. Yeah,
well, you may not see, as I said, they don't come with a magic wand and wave away our problems. They come and bring people together. They preach peace. The recent visit of Pope Francis to Mozambique and to Madagascar and to Mauritius came at a significant time, because a country like Mozambique, for example, is still to recover
from those flash floods.
Yes, the floods that were there, the hurricane and everything. And the Pope's presence alone, brings people hope. And people who were not thinking that things will work out could then see the necessity to come together to handle their situations in hand, due to the presence of the Pope. And I should remind you that Mozambique is still even to recover from the civil war that has been raging in that country. They just signed a second peace agreement recently, but that the Catholic Church was played a very significant role. There is a non-governmental organization, an NGO from Italy called Sant'Egidio, with the people who brokered that peace after over a decade of fighting in Mozambique. You see, they couldn't do that without the papal approval. Of course. When things like that come, the Pope is there, and the Pope visiting Mozambique at this time, even the Mauritius Island and Madagascar. Those are the countries and islands or lying at the coast of East Africa that suffered significantly from the recent floods. And so on, and you know, Pope Francis has been the Pope in history who has been very adamant for us to respect the environment. He has written a book called Laudato Si, Signore, and in which he asks us, what are we doing to our common home? And the common home is the earth. He says the earth has been given to us. As for us, we are just mere custodians of the earth, and we destroy the earth and destroy the environment. What are we going to leave for our children? The Pope is very categorical about that, and he tells the church and those of us of the Catholic faith, respect the environment. You see, and others will definitely follow, because the environment belongs to all of us. So these are by visiting a country like Mozambique, Mauritius, and Madagascar, the Pope is going. Taking a message of hope to people who have just suffered greatly from these natural disasters. And by that, he's telling world leaders that these natural disasters can be contained. You know?
I'm just thinking, I'm saying President Donald Trump should hear this.
Yes,
but
he
then
should
the question
hear
is,
that.
you come to reboost faith, because in situations like these ones,
that's correct.
People's faith are going to be on the wane. But then, I mean, they just don't only need to see the Pope, they need money to recover.
They need money, yes, but you know, as I say,
you could pray as much as you want to, but then you need money to rebuild
exactly. So
house.
You know, when the Pope comes to a place that Pope John Paul II came to Cameroon on 2 occasions, you see, the message was a message of peace. Get together, have peace. If there's no peace, you know, you cannot develop your country. That's what we are talking about now. This long-awaited inclusive dialogue, or is it exclusive dialogue, which we are all yearning for. You know,
we're coming to dialogue.
That's right. We necessarily bring peace, and that's exactly what the Pope is saying, or what the popes who have visited Africa are saying. And there have been 4, by the way. You know, Paul VI was the first, and then 69, followed by John Paul II, who came to this country on 2 occasions, 1985 and 1995. 10 years later, you and I had a chance in this program once to discuss this one. The impact of his visit. He promulgated what is called ecclesia in Africa, and the impact of that. Well, you and I talked about ecclesia in Africa, and we saw what the fallout of ecclesia in Africa were to the church in Cameroon, for example.
I still think about the radio.
We have a radio station here now, which was an offshoot of that. We have hospitals have been built, you know, based on the Pope's recommendation. When Pope Francis talks about going to the peripheries, he's talking about going to the poor people. You see, and he's very emphatic on that.
Is the church actually going to the poor people?
Well, the church is, to a considerable extent. I mean, I think all churches, whether they're Catholic or whatever,
because they still remain. The poorest in the church are still the backbenchers. They don't sit on the front rows.
I don't know about that, but
that drives me directly to this question. I was going to say, you mentioned Uganda at the start of those explanations. Islam is on the rise in Uganda, for example. I think that's one of the fastest growing religions in the eastern parts of Africa, and that's particularly in Uganda. But then, when the first Papal visit to Africa was Uganda, then how is Islam taking over?
Well, I don't know about Islam taking over. Islam may be growing, you know, which is something which, well, the main fact that Islam is growing may not be a bad thing. What is really bad is fundamental Islamism, where you know, people are preaching the gospel of destruction, the gospel of violence. That is what is bad, I think. Because the Catholic Church in Cameroon and elsewhere have had significant dialogue with Islam for several years. You see, It's the fundamentalism of it all that makes it bad, I think. Where people decide that if you don't believe what I'm saying, I'm going to kill you.
Okay.
That is what is bad. And
if you don't mind, I'll just step on to the next. I thought that these were a couple of tricky questions I had for you. Next one is, Pope John Paul II comes to Cameroon 2 times.
Right.
The other Pope who precedes him comes to the same Cameroon 2 times.
No, once.
Once rather.
Yes.
The question in there is,
the 16th, yes.
Why are the popes going to these countries which are considered, whose governments are considered people unfriendly?
Well,
Cameroon is like quote unquote endorsing the regimes.
No, the popes don't only go to countries that people whose governments are considered unfriendly. Well, you have to define that. But they go to places where they believe the people need their presence. When the Pope goes to the Central African Republic, as Pope Francis did in 2015? Yes. When the Pope landed in Bangui, there were bullets flying all over the place. He went to the Archbishop's house, and the Archbishop's house had been housing hundreds of Muslim refugees that had escaped from Christian violence. So the question of violence is not only from the side of Islam. They're fundamental Christians too who are doing that. And the significant thing in Bangui is that after the Pope's visit, there were peace talks that had stalled before. So you see, so when you ask what is the impact of a papal visit, there is the impact.
All right, I can see
especially for people who are ruling the country, for sure.
All right.
Yes. Okay.
Well, thank you for coming.
Well, it's always a pleasure. I'm there.
Nice to see you up and kicking. And it's good that you're talking dialogue because, as we speak, the process is on in Cameroon.
The process is on, and we are waiting and hoping and praying that it succeeds. So that our people can go back to their normal lives.
Right.
Especially the northwest and the southwest regions of our country.
Thanks once again.
Greatly affected. My pleasure.
Thanks sincerely. We'll be waiting to see you back on Monday.
On Monday, yes.
I'm feeling it because
everything being equal, God willing, I will be here on Monday.
Thanks a lot.
Yes.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks for staying on with us. If you're still there and if you have some time, please just stay on your seat, right? Because we'll show you in the next couple of minutes how to fight your way to fame and to wealth. We'll also take you over to Nigeria to shed some light on the deteriorating plight of an estimated 35,000 Cameroonian refugees who have fled this nation as a result of the raging conflict in the English-speaking Northwest and Southwest regions. And consultations are ongoing. They're gathering momentum in Yaoundé and precisely at the Prime Minister's office towards laying the groundwork for dialogue. We were mentioning it a while ago. Now let's get an opinion from someone. He's actually the general coordinator of the Cameroon Federalist Movement. He's called Dr. Wilson Lobe Eseme. He filed in